or willingly went to the zoo? Okay, that's what I was going to say. Zoo's main interpretation is known to be a place for the kids, an occasional field trip, or even, I don't know if that's your boat, like cute dates ideas, or I don't know, if you want to go to zoo. Since we're only the visitors, we only see a portion of what happens inside zoos. We never think of zoos as a prison for animals. Today I'll discuss the disappointing experience that animals have to face when they're forced to live in zoos or aquatic facilities. Make it, sorry. There are currently 100,000 zoos worldwide that force animals to live in these adequate conditions. I will first analyze the quality. No, I will analyze the quality of life of wildlife animals in zoos versus their natural habitat. Then observe their behaviors, their lack of ability to perform survival skills, and how their purposes, zoos' original purposes, are not necessarily effective. Wildlife animals have shown behavior patterns of discomfort. Many animals held in captivity begin to form abnormal symptoms referred as zoochosis. These neurotic and atypical behaviors occur as a result of boredom, depression, frustration, a lack of mental and physical enrichment, and removal from their natural habitat and social structures. According to LCA, signs of zoochosis include bar biting, chlorophobia, which is they play with their poop, but whatever. And stop mutilation, circling, rocking, swaying, pacing, rolling, twisting, and nodding of the head, vomiting, frequent leaking, and constantly swim in circles. Often zoos animals will have their backs turned from the audience. Many fall in depression, for example, such as they're forced to participate in mating and often separate from their young. And separation of families or pack units for the sake of breeding is another stress factor caused by zoos. Levels of discomfort can lead to other serious consequences. For example, elephants are very social and they live in herds, but versus in zoos they usually have 2 or 3, which is not compared to their normal in the wildlife habitat. There are cases that many of these wild animals snap, if you want to use that term, and hurt their trainers. For example, one of the common forms is in SeaWorld. There have been 4 deaths and a number of accidents and the most recent one was in February 24, 2010. An orca named Tithium pulled the SeaWorld trainer Dawn into his pool and killed her. And the reason it made a huge controversy was because she was a really famous trainer, well experienced, and it was during a show. Okay, so orcas are ranked among the world's most powerful predators and are known to take sea lions right off the ice. And so, which is pretty frustrating when they're shocked for a wildlife animal for being a wildlife animal. So, and it's not even frustrating, but almost very selfish when discussing what should happen after an animal. There are considerations for their behavior. Their typical behavior is considered in their what will happen, and so that's kind of selfish to assume that you trained a wildlife animal. So, according to the study, another sign, immune anxiety disorders in chimpanzee by Patrick Taylor displays chimpanzees display clusters similar to PTSD and depression in their key diagnostic criteria. There's not an accurate estimate, but since zoos have a lot of disclosures on privacy, but according to Wild Things by Laura Smith, gorillas, badgers, giraffes, belugas, or wallabies are taking other forms of medications to make them more relaxed or for the zoo purposes more happy and cheerful. Known cases is the Gus, the polar bear, also known as that bipolar bear. So he was very uncomfortable for the visitors to watch because he would swim in figure eights and constantly stalk children through his window with a predatory gaze, which is weird because he is a predator. This result led him to receive several doses of Prozac and thousands words of behavioral therapy. Now that I discussed the average behavior animals have, I will move on to the limitations they are forced to accumulate. In terms of quality of life, animals in zoos lack a lot of the fundamental freedoms. Continue to use elephants as an example. Since they live in zoos, they receive little exercise. In the wild, an elephant walks for at least 30 miles a day, which is why they're prone to become overweight and experience health problems such as tuberculosis, arthritis, and food absences and breathing programs have proven to be very unsuccessful, with many of the cats dying prematurely. This is primarily because of lack of space zoos have. According to Global Sanctuary for Elephants, zoos give elephants about 2 or 3 acres of land. In reality, if you multiply that by 10, that is still survive. The polar bear Gus I mentioned, he had 0.00009% of the space he would have in his natural habitat. The lack of space also limits wildlife to perform their born physical abilities. They are limited to running, flying, swimming, and socializing with others, since there is a cap on the number of animals in zoos they can afford to take care. Now, after discussing the lack of freedoms animals have to express themselves, I will now go over the purpose people claim for zoos are not truly great. Counter arguments to keep zoos is that they help endangered animals and they are educational. So of course, yes, they do live longer, except actually elephants don't live as long in zoos. They're actually 10 years shorter than they would in the wild. But for a good majority, a lot of animals do live longer. But that is common because we eliminate the common factors they're faced. They're fed and protected every day by gates. The idea to help sustain these animals and off in the wild is not necessarily true. Yet majority of them do not survive once they're released. According to Zoos in the 21st Century by Devin Maskey, mentions that the only successful attempts were these tiny tamarinds. But attempts to reintroduce like the orangutans and other species have ended in complete failure. With zoo-bred animals providing to unprepared to cope with the rigors of life in the wild, according to the National Geographic, they're more likely to starve to death than wild-bred counterparts, and they're more likely to catch viruses and diseases. Many of the skills they're meant to survive, they learn on their own and in the wild, and so that is one of the reasons why they're not successful. And regarding the education aspect, according to Big Cat Rescue, most people spend less between a minute during an exhibit, and 60% is spent during walking, 10% is for eating, and the other percent is spent on spending breaks, bathroom, etc. There are other ways to learn about wildlife animals. Everything is on the internet, and if you want actual drama, suspense, and the falling from birth to life, I would recommend Animal Planet. We have to acknowledge that the main purpose why we go to zoo is for our own entertainment. There are millions donated to such causes, but in reality, a majority is spent on luring visitors and trying to recreate somewhat of a realistic habitat for the animals, but in reality, you can never truly capture what they need. Today, I explain the typical behaviors and animals, how they're limited to experience, and how their zoo's purposes are not necessarily effective. Captivity of wildlife animals is morally wrong. My proposition is to use the millions of dollars spent on failed training efforts and the endless construction of an impossible, sensible homes and use it to restore the habitat, advocate for stricter laws, and fix the source of the problem.